Thank you so much.
That's right.
Well, joining me now to break this down even further is Alex Zdan, a GOP political strategist and former U.S. Senate candidate for New Jersey. Good morning, Alex.
It's great to be with you.
Good to have you here as well. I was just asking Alex Cayetano about the gaffes that Mr. Biden has made and how Mr. Trump has just stayed on top of that, poking fun. Do you believe that Mr. Biden's last efforts of late have been enough to assuage the concerns for so many of his supporters?
Well, clearly not, because you still saw Democratic House members issuing a statement urging President Biden to exit the race as soon as the president got off that stage on Thursday. Obviously, the defections are continuing. The President Biden, has made some effort to cull and bully people onto his side, but it seems that Democrats who want President Biden to exit the race are engaging in a frankly anti-democratic process. They are trying to change the rules. President Biden is correct. He got the most votes, the overwhelming majority of votes during the primary contest, where he was not seriously opposed, only opposed by Congressman Dean Phillips. Now he's the presumptive nominee. There is no return policy on presumptive presidential nominees. The Democratic Party bought him, and he's broken.
Alex, don't forget about Marianne Williamson. You know, she'd be a little upset with you right now if you forgot about her, too, also challenging Mr. Biden. Listen, I do want to ask you this, though. Both candidates have been campaigning in swing states since the debate, both Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Mr. Trump has taken lead against Mr. Biden in all three of those states. What has Mr. Trump been doing that Biden is not?
Well, I think that former President Trump is being former President Trump. He is rallying the party around him. He is advocating for blue-collar jobs for folks who might not have college degrees. He's advocating for a strong economy. He's advocating to fight inflation, which we just saw ticked up yet again this past week. He is making the case that he would be a better steward of the economy than President Joe Biden has been. And we have seen in so many elections that that economic message resonates so deeply with voters who are living paycheck to paycheck.
But Alex, even with questions around Mr. Biden's mental acuity, Mr. Trump should be doing better poll-wise right now, right?
Well, I think that what we're seeing is a point in the election where people have not totally tuned in. It's the summertime, people are away. September and October are typically times when people tune a lot more closely into an election of any kind. So we will also get the Republican National Convention as an opportunity for President Trump to speak directly to the American people in an event that's typically fairly well watched, and he will be able to lay out his case quite clearly as to why he is the best nominee, the best person to take America forward after November.
And the announcement of his running mate. Mr. Biden held a rally in Michigan. Let's listen to some of that sound and speak on the other side.
You made me the nominee, no one else, not the press, not the pundits, not the insiders, not donors. You, the voters, you decided, no one else, and I'm not going anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere. If he's not bowing out, then how does he plan to rally his party, given how many people we just spoke about are calling for the president to step aside?
It's obviously not going to be easy. What you saw at that rally is what I term teleprompter Joe. You've got teleprompter Joe and sundown Joe. President Biden has been in politics for 50 years. He's got muscle memory, and if you put a teleprompter up in front of him, he can deliver a speech like that. He can rouse a crowd, but behind closed doors, it's an entirely different situation. I think what President Biden's aides incorrectly state is when they talk about the debate as a performance, and sure, it is on some level, the American people aren't worried about a bad night the president might have on the debate stage. They're worried about a bad night he might have in the Situation Room where he's trying to fulfill his job, keep Americans safe.
And both camps have made it clear that they need support from minorities, particularly African Americans. And it seems as though the Congressional Black Caucus continues to stand behind Mr. Biden. Why is Mr. Trump having trouble garnering support from those of color?
Well, I'll say first and foremost, President Biden seems to have, in a call with congressional leadership, congressional black leadership, essentially battered them into saying that he should remain their nominee. He's obviously taking a very hard tack because he knows that that constituency is so crucial. We've seen from the polls that President Trump is doing better in the Black community than he did in 2020. And I think President Trump would say that he's leading with an economic message that helps all people of all colors and all races. Opportunity for all is the watchword of the Republican Party. It has been for quite some time.
Alex, can you really batter James Clyburn and Maxine Waters? I think that James Clyburn is the one who kind of battered Mr. Biden into making different decisions in 2020.
That's quite fair. Maybe he's trying to butter him up, not batter him.
A question, though. How seriously do you take the weight of Mr. Trump's convictions? Is that something that voters will also weigh when they head into the polls in November?
We will see if those convictions are still on the books in November. Obviously, the judge in former President Trump's case is allowing a September hearing to discuss whether, in light of the presidential immunity ruling by the Supreme Court, those convictions will stand. We could be talking about an entirely different universe in regard to those court cases come November. Let's wait and see what the judge has to say on that. There could be a very major ruling coming in September.
Alex, last question for you. So much has been made about this could be Kamala Harris's chance. Do you really believe that Kamala Harris could be a viable candidate should Mr. Biden step down?
She is over 35 years old and she has a pulse. That is the criteria in the U.S. Constitution for a presidential candidate. So could she? Sure. Would she be able to beat Donald Trump? I don't think so.
Alex, you know what? Now, that was the laugh I needed on a Saturday